The radio crackled with routine chatter across the civilian airspace of Wyoming's eastern corridor. Controllers at Cheyenne Regional monitored the usual morning traffic: a Cessna inbound from Denver, two commercial jets beginning their descent, a medevac helicopter requesting clearance. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would make anyone stop mid-sip of lukewarm coffee or lean closer to their screens. Then came the voice. A woman's voice, calm and precise, calling in a flight plan that shouldn't have existed. Cheyenne Tower, this is November 7 Niner Whiskey Tango, civilian charter requesting transition through restricted airspace Romeo 572, direct heading 270. The senior controller, Malcolm Reeves, felt something cold slide down his spine. He knew that voice. Everyone who'd served in the Air Force between 2008 and 2015 knew that voice. It belonged to someone who'd been declared killed in action over the Hindu Kush 7 years ago. Captain Iris, widow Kavanagh. The woman whose F-16 had vanished without a trace during a classified operation that officially never happened. The woman whose name was etched on a memorial wall at Nellis Air Force Base alongside 73 others who died in the same shadowy conflict. Reeves' hand hovered over the transmit button. His throat felt dry. November 7 Niner Whiskey Tango, say again your call sign and pilot identification. There was a pause. Not hesitation, calculation. Cheyenne Tower, pilot is Iris Kavanagh, civilian license Bravo Charlie 7482 November. Passenger manifest includes one dependent age 6, requesting expedited clearance. The room went silent. 3 other controllers turned toward Reeves, their faces slack with disbelief. Iris Kavanagh was flying a civilian aircraft with a 6-year-old passenger through military airspace, using her real name, acting as if she hadn't been erased from existence. Reeves forced himself to breathe. Protocol demanded he verify credentials, run background checks, coordinate with military command. But something else demanded he simply clear her through, something human, something that recognized the quiet exhaustion threading through her words. November 7 Niner Whiskey Tango, stand by for clearance confirmation. He pulled up the registration. The aircraft was a Piper Saratoga, registered 3 months ago to an I. Kavanagh in Laramie. Current. Legal. Impossible. His junior controller, Amy Chen, leaned over. Sir, that can't be her. Captain Kavanagh's been dead since. I know when she died, Reeves interrupted. Pull up her military flight records, everything we can access. While Chen worked, Reeves watched the radar blip representing November 7 Niner Whiskey Tango. It moved with absolute precision, the kind of flying that came from thousands of hours in cockpits where mistakes meant death. Whatever this was, ghost, imposter, or miracle, it flew like Iris Kavanagh always had, like someone who'd been born with wings. Chen's screen flickered to life. Classified files, mostly redacted, but the photos were clear enough. Dark hair pulled back, severe gray eyes that looked through cameras instead of at them, a jawline that suggested Slavic ancestry somewhere in the bloodline. 43 combat missions. 16 confirmed kills. 2 silver stars, one of them classified. And a reputation that had followed her through every squadron she'd ever touched. Widow earned her call sign not from marriage but from the way she left enemy pilots, alone, falling, wondering what had hit them. Sir, facial recognition confirms it's her, Chen whispered. 97% match from the aircraft's transponder camera feed, but how is she? Not our concern right now, Reeves said, though his hands were shaking. Clear her through Romeo 572. Coordinate with Warren Air Force Base for unrestricted passage. But protocol requires, clear her through. He keyed the radio. November 7 Niner Whiskey Tango, you are cleared through restricted airspace Romeo 572. Maintain current heading and altitude. Contact Warren approach on 124.3. Copy Cheyenne, switching frequencies. The voice was steady, professional, and underneath it all tired. Bone tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. Reeves sat back, staring at the radar screen. Somewhere in that Piper Saratoga was a woman who'd supposedly been vaporized 7 years ago and a 6-year-old child. The implications were staggering. If Kavanagh had survived, where had she been? Why had she stayed hidden? And why resurface now, flying through military airspace with a child? At Warren Air Force Base, Captain Josh Brenner was coordinating missile defense exercises when the call came through from Cheyenne. Say again, you're passing us what? Civilian aircraft, single pilot requesting passage. Pilot identification is Iris Kavanagh. Brenner dropped his clipboard. That's not funny. I'm not joking, sir, it's her. Confirmed visual and voice match. She's flying with a minor passenger. Brenner's mind raced through possibilities, each more impossible than the last. Widow Kavanagh had been his instructor at Red Flag back in 2012. The woman who taught him that speed without precision was just noise, that every engagement was decided in the 3 seconds before anyone pulled a trigger. She'd saved his life during a training exercise gone wrong, talking him through hydraulic failure with the kind of calm that made miracles seem routine. "Give me her frequency," he said. He switched channels. November 7 Niner Whiskey Tango, Warren approach. Captain Josh Brenner. I don't know how this is possible, but if you're really Widow, you'll know the answer to this. What did you tell me when my stick froze over Nellie's? Silence stretched across the channel. Then, I told you to stop flying the aircraft and let the aircraft fly itself. That fear makes you grip too hard and the Viper can feel it. Brenner's eyes burned. It was her, the exact words, the exact phrasing. Welcome home, Widow. You've got unrestricted passage through Warren airspace. What do you need? Another pause. Just passage, Viper 2. I'm taking my son to see his grandfather before it's too late, son. The word hung in the air like a flare. Iris Kavanagh had a son. Brenner made a decision that would probably end his career. November 7 Niner Whiskey Tango, be advised you have 4 F-16s on routine patrol in your vicinity. Consider them your escort until you're clear of military airspace. They won't contact you, but they'll make sure nobody bothers you either. That's not necessary, Viper 2. It absolutely is, Widow. You taught half of them to fly. They deserve to know you're alive. The line went quiet. When Kavanagh spoke again, her voice was rough. Tell them thank you, and tell them I'm sorry. Nothing to apologize for, ma'am. Viper 2 out. Brenner switched to the tactical frequency. Viper flight, we have a special package transiting our airspace. November 7 Niner Whiskey Tango, civilian Piper Saratoga. You will form up at a respectful distance and escort her to the western boundary. No radio contact unless she initiates. Acknowledge. 4 confirmations came back, sharp and professional, but Brenner knew the pilots would have questions. He'd brief them after. Right now, someone who'd been dead for 7 years was flying through Wyoming airspace with her son, and whatever had kept her in the shadows for so long, she decided it was time to come home. Inside November 7 Niner Whiskey Tango, Iris Kavanagh kept her eyes on the horizon and her hands steady on the yoke. In the right seat, 6-year-old David slept with his head against the window, oblivious to the significance of the moment. She'd spent 7 years building a life in the margins, fake identities, cash transactions, constant movement, protecting him from the people who'd wanted her dead, the same people who'd sent her into the Hindu Kush with coordinates that led straight into an ambush. She'd survived by being smarter, faster, and more ruthless than they'd anticipated. But survival wasn't living, and her father was dying of pancreatic cancer in a VA hospital in Casper, with maybe 2 weeks left. David deserved to meet his grandfather. She deserved to say goodbye, even if it meant exposing herself. Even if it meant answering questions she'd spent 7 years avoiding. The F-16s appeared off her wing, 2 port, 2 starboard, maintaining perfect formation at a distance that conveyed respect rather than intercept. She recognized the aircraft markings. The 90th Fighter Squadron, the same unit she'd flown with during her first deployment. The same unit that had held a memorial service for her while she'd been bleeding out in a cave system 300 miles from any map coordinate that officially existed. Iris keyed her radio braking protocol. Viper flight, November 7 Niner Whiskey Tango, appreciate the escort. The lead pilot responded immediately, his voice young and uncertain. Ma'am, it's an honor. We've all heard the stories. Everyone at Nellie's knows about the Widow's Run. The Widow's Run. She almost smiled. That particular piece of mythology had grown in her absence. The mission where she'd taken on 4 enemy aircraft alone after her wingman was hit, dropping two with missiles and forcing the others to bug out through sheer aggression and precision flying. Command had classified it immediately, but stories like that never stayed classified. They became legend, passed down through ready rooms and briefings, growing with each retelling. Viper Lead, tell me something. Do they still teach my approach patterns at Red Flag? Yes, ma'am, your defensive spiral is mandatory curriculum. Saved my life during an exercise with aggressors last year. David stirred beside her, blinking awake. He looked out the window and saw the F-16s, his eyes going wide. Mom, are those fighter jets? They are, sweetheart. They're making sure we get to Grandpa safely. Are they your friends? Iris watched the aircraft hold formation, their wings catching the morning sun. Were they friends? She didn't know these pilots. They'd been in high school when she'd vanished. But they flew with the precision she'd helped establish, followed procedures she'd written, executed maneuvers she'd perfected through blood and fire. In a way, yes, they were family. Something like that, David. The lead F-16 rocked its wings once, a salute between pilots. Iris returned it, tipping her own wings in acknowledgement. For a moment she wasn't a ghost. She wasn't a woman hiding from assassins and Black Ops cleanup crews. She was Captain Iris Kavanagh, call sign Widow, flying free in the only place she'd ever truly belonged. Then Viper Lead's voice came through again, more serious now. November 7 Niner Whiskey Tango, be advised we're picking up increased radio chatter on military frequencies. Multiple units requesting information about your flight. You might have more attention than you wanted. Iris's jaw tightened. Of course. The moment she'd used her real name, every intelligence agency with access to FAA databases would have flagged it. People who'd thought she was safely dead would suddenly be very interested in where she'd been and what she knew. Copy Viper Lead, I expected as much. Ma'am, if you need anything, if there's any threat, we're authorized to provide defensive support. She felt something warm and unfamiliar in her chest. Gratitude, maybe, or recognition that some bonds transcended death and deception. Negative, Viper Lead. This is something I need to handle on my own terms, but thank you. The F-16s peeled off at the western boundary of military airspace, each aircraft executing a perfect break that would have made her proud if she'd been their instructor. Iris continued west toward Casper, alone again except for her sleeping son. Her phone, a burner she'd bought yesterday, buzzed in her flight bag. 3 missed calls from a number she recognized. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Vance, her old commanding officer, the woman who'd signed off on the mission that was supposed to kill her. The woman who might have known it was a trap. Iris ignored the calls. She'd deal with command later. Right now, her father was dying, and David needed to meet the man who taught her to fly crop dusters over Nebraska farmland when she was barely tall enough to see over the instrument panel. The man who'd driven her to her first day at the Air Force Academy and told her that fear was just information, not instruction. The Casper Airport appeared on the horizon, small and utilitarian. Iris called in her approach, half expecting complications. Instead, the controller, an older man with a gravelly voice, cleared her immediately and added something unofficial. Welcome back, Captain. A lot of people are glad you're alive. Word was spreading fast. Iris landed smoothly, taxied to the general aviation parking and shut down the engine. David unbuckled, looking at her with his father's green eyes and her own stubborn jaw. Are we in trouble, Mom? She smoothed his hair, considering her answer. Trouble was relative when you'd spent 7 years living as a ghost. Maybe, sweetheart, but sometimes doing the right thing means accepting trouble as the price. Grandpa says you're the bravest person he knows. Iris felt her throat constrict. Grandpa's biased. What's biased mean? It means he loves me even when I don't deserve it. She gathered their bags and helped David down from the aircraft. A black SUV was parked near the terminal, engine running. 2 men in suits stood beside it, their posture screaming federal agents. Not aggressive, but present. Watching. Iris set down the bags and put herself between David and the SUV. Old instincts, impossible to suppress. One of the agents held up his hands, showing empty palms. Captain Kavanagh, we're not here to detain you, just to talk. About what? My miraculous resurrection, the mission that never happened, or maybe about who changed my coordinates 7 years ago and sent me into an ambush. The agent's face remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Confirmation. All of that eventually. But right now, we're here because your reappearance has created a significant intelligence problem. People who thought you were dead are panicking. And when people panic, they make mistakes that endanger operational security. Not my problem anymore. I resigned the moment I realized Command tried to kill me. You can't resign from what you know, Captain. You carried top-secret information about operations that are still active. Your survival means that information might be compromised. Iris laughed, sharp and bitter. You mean you're worried I'll talk? That I'll expose whatever political clusterfuck led to 43 American personnel being sacrificed to cover up someone's bad intelligence? The second agent stepped forward, older, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades in dark corners of government service. We're worried you'll become a target, again, and this time your son will be collateral damage. Ice flooded Iris's veins. David pressed against her leg, sensing the threat he couldn't fully understand. Are you threatening my child? No, ma'am. I'm warning you that the people who wanted you dead 7 years ago still exist, still have resources, and now know exactly where you are. We're offering protection. In exchange for what? My silence. My cooperation with whatever narrative you're spinning. The older agent's expression softened. In exchange for nothing, Captain. You earned protection the moment you put on the uniform. What happened to you was wrong. Some of us have spent 7 years trying to figure out who gave the order. Now you're alive, and that changes the equation. We can use you to draw them out. Iris studied him, looking for deception. She'd become an expert at reading lies, at detecting the micro-expressions that revealed true intent. What she saw was exhaustion and something that might have been hope. You want me to be bait? We want you to live your life, visit your father, raise your son. And when they make their move, because they will, we'll be ready. David tugged at her sleeve. Mom, I'm hungry. Can we see Grandpa now? The simple request cut through the tension. Iris made a decision that combined trust and tactical calculation in equal measure. Fine, but we do this my way. No surveillance on my father. No interference with my movements unless there's an immediate threat. And if I find out you're using this situation for anything other than protecting my family, I'll disappear again. And this time you won't find me. The older agent nodded. Agreed. My name is Thomas Garrett. I was your father's co-pilot in Vietnam. He pulled me out of a burning Huey in 1971. I owe him my life. I'm not going to let anything happen to his daughter or grandson. That changed things, not completely, but enough. Iris picked up the bags. The VA hospital, 30 minutes. If I see anyone following us, this conversation never happened. Understood, Captain. Garrett handed her a card. My direct number. Use it if you need extraction or support. And Captain, it's good to see you alive. A lot of people never stop believing. Iris took the card and walked toward the terminal with David, her situational awareness cataloging every vehicle, every person, every potential threat. 7 years of paranoia didn't evaporate because someone offered help. Trust was earned in millimeters, lost in miles. The hospital was exactly as depressing as she'd expected. Fluorescent lights, antiseptic smell, the quiet desperation of people waiting for loved ones to either recover or die. Iris held David's hand as they navigated corridors to room 347. Her father, General Marcus Cavanaugh, USAF retired, lay in bed looking like a shadow of the man who taught her barrel rolls and tactical approaches. 74 years old, 90 pounds lighter than his prime, skin gray with approaching death. But his eyes, those sharp blue eyes that missed nothing, locked onto her face with absolute recognition and flooded with tears. Iris, he whispered, they told me you were dead. She crossed the room and took his hand, feeling how fragile he'd become. I was, for a while, long enough to figure out who wanted me that way. Marcus's gaze shifted to David and something transformed in his face. Wonder, joy, the kind of emotion she'd rarely seen from a man who'd commanded fighter wings in strategic operations. Is this your grandson, David? He's 6. David approached the bed cautiously. Iris had told him about his grandfather in abstract terms. A pilot, a hero, a man who'd flown in wars before David was born. But abstract became real when David saw the old photographs on the bedside table. Marcus in flight suit beside an F-4 Phantom, younger and invincible. Grandpa, Mom says you taught her to fly. Marcus smiled, and for a moment he looked almost healthy. I did, best student I ever had. Stubborn as hell, but that's what makes great pilots. You willing to be stubborn, David? Mom says I'm stubborn all the time. Then you've got Kavanaugh blood. That's a good start. Iris sat on the edge of the bed, feeling 7 years of isolation crack open. She'd survived by cutting herself off from everyone, by becoming a ghost without connections or vulnerabilities. But sitting here with her father dying and her son meeting the family she'd thought she'd lost forever, the isolation felt less like survival and more like cowardice. Dad, I need to tell you what happened, why I disappeared. Marcus squeezed her hand. I know what happened, Iris. Tom Garrett visited me 3 years ago, told me everything they'd pieced together. The compromised mission, the ambush, the cleanup operation that was supposed to erase any survivors. I knew you were either dead or smart enough to stay hidden. You knew for 3 years. I knew, and I respected your choice to stay gone, but I also never stopped hoping you'd come back before. He gestured weakly at the IV lines, the morphine pump, the equipment measuring his remaining time in increments. Before this, Iris's eyes burned. I'm sorry I waited so long. Don't be. You kept yourself alive. You protected my grandson. That's all that matters. Marcus looked at David, who was examining the flight photographs with intense curiosity. Your mother is the finest pilot I've ever seen. Better than me, better than anyone in her generation. She has instincts that can't be taught. When she was 17, I took her up in a T-6 Texan, and she executed a 4-point roll so perfect I thought I was having a flashback to my instructor days. She was born for the sky. David looked at Iris with new appreciation. You never told me you were famous, Mom. I'm not famous, sweetheart. I was just good at my job. She's being modest, Marcus said. Your mother once landed an F-16 with a completely failed hydraulic system, no flaps, and a crosswind that should have made it impossible. Saved a $40 million aircraft and herself through sheer skill. They used the recording in training courses for 5 years. Iris felt uncomfortable with the praise, with the mythology that had grown around her absence. Dad, the mission that went wrong. You know who gave the order, who set it up? Marcus's expression darkened. Garrett has a theory, high-level Pentagon official, someone with access to operational planning and a motivation to eliminate personnel who'd seen something they shouldn't have. The mission you flew was legitimate. The coordinates were changed after final briefing. Someone with serious clearance diverted you into enemy territory with no support. Who would have that kind of access and motivation? Someone protecting an intelligence failure. Your squadron was gathering evidence of unauthorized weapons sales to militant groups. If that evidence had been properly documented and reported, it would have exposed a multi-billion-dollar black market operation with ties to U.S. defense contractors. The implications were staggering. Iris had always known the mission felt wrong, that the intelligence was too precise, the target too perfect. But understanding it was bait to eliminate witnesses made her blood run cold. How many people did they kill to keep that quiet? 43 confirmed. You were supposed to be number 44. David was still looking at photographs, oblivious to the conversation's dark turn. Iris was grateful for that innocence, for the fact that her son didn't yet understand the casual evil that existed in the world. Marcus coughed, a wet sound that made the monitors spike. Listen to me, Iris. Whatever you decide to do, whether you pursue this or let it go, know that I'm proud of you. You survived. You built a life. You're raising a good boy. That's more than most people manage. I can't just let it go, Dad. 43 people are dead because someone decided protecting weapons sales was more important than American lives. Then you'll need allies. Garrett is one. There are others in the intelligence community who have been waiting for proof, for a survivor who can testify. But it'll be dangerous. These people have unlimited resources and no moral boundaries. I've survived 7 years on my own. I can handle dangerous. Marcus smiled, sad and proud. You're my daughter. I never doubted that. They stayed for hours, talking about David's life, Iris's years in hiding, the small mundane details that built a life outside of conspiracies and survival. Marcus held David on his lap and told him stories about flight school, about aerial combat over Hanoi, about the moment he knew his daughter would be something extraordinary. When visiting hours ended, Iris kissed her father's forehead and promised to return tomorrow. Outside the hospital, Thomas Garrett was waiting by a different vehicle. "Captain, we've had developments." Iris's hand moved toward the concealed weapon she carried everywhere. "What kind of developments?" "The kind where 3 encrypted communications were intercepted discussing your current location. Someone wants you silenced and they're moving assets into position." "How long do I have?" 12 hours, maybe less. "We can move you and your son to a secure facility." "No, no more hiding. If they want me, they can come, but we do this on my terms in a place of my choosing." Garrett studied her face and seemed to understand. "You want to draw them out. I want to end this. 7 years is long enough." He nodded slowly. "Then let's make a plan that keeps your son safe and gives us the best chance of capturing whoever's running this operation." They spent the next 3 hours in a secure room at the local FBI field office, mapping out an operation that combined Iris's tactical knowledge with Garrett's intelligence resources. The plan was simple. Iris would remain visible, maintaining her routine while a hidden team positioned themselves to intercept any hostile action. David would be protected by federal marshals at a secure location, away from any potential combat zone. Iris hated the separation but accepted its necessity. At midnight, she held David while he slept in a safe house 20 miles from Casper. She memorized his face, the curve of his cheek, the way his breathing settled into perfect rhythm. If something went wrong tomorrow, she wanted this memory crystallized. Garrett entered quietly. "Assets are in position. We've identified 3 potential shooters who arrived in Casper in the last 6 hours. Former special operations, currently working private contracts. They're being monitored. And the person who hired them, still working on that, but we're close. Your reappearance has forced someone to act rashly, and rash actions leave traces." Iris gently placed David in bed and covered him with a blanket. "When this is over, if I survive, I want full immunity for anything I disclose about classified operations. I want protection for my son, and I want the names of everyone responsible for that ambush." "You'll have it. You have my word." She looked at him directly. "Your word means something." "It's the only thing that does, Captain. I've spent 40 years in this business watching good people die for bad reasons. I'm tired of it. This is my chance to balance the ledger." Morning arrived cold and clear. Iris drove to the hospital alone, hyper-aware of every vehicle, every pedestrian, every angle of attack. The concealed vest under her jacket felt reassuring. The weapon at her hip was a familiar weight. She'd spent 7 years becoming someone who could survive anything. Today would test whether that was true. Marcus was awake when she arrived, looking worse than yesterday. The morphine doses had increased. Time was measured in hours now, not days. "Where's David?" "Safe. With people I trust." Her father understood immediately. "They're coming for you. Today, maybe in the next few hours. And you're using yourself as bait." "It's the only way to end this, Dad. I can't keep running. I can't raise David in the shadows." Marcus nodded weakly. "Then do what you're trained to do. Be faster, smarter, and more ruthless than they expect. And Iris, come back. David needs his mother. I need to know you'll be okay." She kissed his forehead. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, warrior. Go be extraordinary." Iris left the room and positioned herself in the hospital cafeteria, public space, multiple exits, security cameras. She bought coffee and sat where she could observe the entrance. Garrett's voice came through her hidden earpiece. "3 targets confirmed. 2 entering from main entrance, 1 from emergency access. They're trying to box you in." "Copy. I see 2 of them. Civilians in the area. Minimal. We're evacuating the cafeteria under the guise of a gas leak. You'll have 60 seconds of clear space." The evacuation announcement echoed through the building. People moved toward exits with the casual urgency of a drill. Iris remained seated, watching the 2 men approach. They wore civilian clothes but moved with military precision, their hands positioned for quick weapon access. When the cafeteria emptied, Iris stood and faced them. "Gentlemen, you've come a long way to finish a job you failed at 7 years ago." The lead man, late 30s, scarred jaw, dead eyes, smiled. Captain Kavanagh, you're more trouble alive than anyone anticipated. Who sent you? You know I can't answer that, just come quietly, make this easy. Iris laughed. I've never made anything easy in my life. She moved before they could react, closing the distance and driving her elbow into the lead man's throat. He staggered back, choking. The second man reached for his weapon, but Iris was faster, disarming him with a technique she'd learned from Israeli commandos during cross-training. The gun clattered across the floor. Federal agents poured in from 3 entrances, weapons drawn. The 2 men went down under overwhelming force, restrained and hauled away. Garrett approached, weapon lowered. Third target. Emergency access. I'm going. Iris sprinted through corridors, following the route the third shooter would take to reach her father's room. She rounded a corner and saw him, older, professional, a suppressed pistol already drawn. He stood outside room 347, calculating his next move. Step away from the door, Iris commanded. The man turned slowly. Recognition flickered across his face. You're supposed to be dead. People keep saying that. Drop the weapon. Instead, he raised it toward Marcus's door. Iris fired twice, center mass, exactly as she'd been trained. The man collapsed, the suppressed pistol falling from his hand. Hospital security and federal agents arrived seconds later. Garrett checked the body and retrieved a phone. We've got communication. This might lead us to whoever's running the operation. Marcus's voice came weakly through the door. Iris, are you all right? She entered the room, holstering her weapon. I'm fine, Dad. It's over. No, Garrett said from the doorway. It's not over, but we have enough now to start dismantling the network. Captain, you just became the most important witness in a federal investigation that spans 7 years and multiple continents. Iris sat beside her father, taking his hand. How long will the investigation take? Months, maybe longer. You'll need to testify, provide detailed intelligence, work with prosecutors. I'll do whatever it takes, but David stays protected. That's non-negotiable. Agreed. Marcus squeezed her hand. You came back to say goodbye, but I think you're going to be around for a while longer, causing trouble and making people regret underestimating you. That's the plan, Dad. Good. The world needs more trouble from people like you. He closed his eyes, exhausted but smiling. Iris stayed with him through the day, holding his hand while federal agents processed the crime scene and Garrett coordinated with Washington. David arrived in the evening, escorted by marshals. He climbed into bed beside his grandfather and told him about his day, cartoons he'd watched, games he'd played, completely oblivious to the violence that had occurred. Marcus listened with absolute attention, treasuring every word. When David fell asleep, Marcus looked at Iris. I'm ready now. I got to meet my grandson. I got to see you safe. That's more than most people get. Don't talk like that. You're going to. I'm dying, Iris. I've made peace with it. But I need you to make peace with something too. What? With being extraordinary, with accepting that you're not meant for ordinary life. You're a warrior, always have been. David needs to see that, to understand that strength isn't something to hide. Iris felt tears on her face. I just want him to be safe. He will be, because you'll teach him to be strong and smart and brave like you. Marcus drifted into sleep. His breathing grew shallower through the night. At 3:47 a.m., with Iris holding his hand and David sleeping against his shoulder, General Marcus Kavanagh died quietly. Iris didn't cry. Not yet. She held him and David both, creating a bridge between the man who taught her to fly and the boy who carried forward their legacy. When dawn came, she called Garrett. I'm ready to testify. I'm ready to name names and burn down whatever organization thought they could erase 43 people without consequences. But after that, I want my life back. I want to teach David to fly. I want to be more than a ghost or a witness. You'll have it, Captain. You have my word. The investigation took 8 months. Iris testified before congressional committees, grand juries, and military tribunals. She detailed the mission, the ambush, her survival, and 7 years of living in the margins. Her testimony led to the arrest of a deputy defense secretary, 3 Pentagon officials, and 17 contractors involved in illegal weapon sales. 43 names were vindicated. Families received closure and compensation. The scandal reshaped defense procurement procedures and intelligence oversight. Throughout it all, Iris raised David in protective custody, teaching him mathematics and flight theory, preparing him for a life that balanced extraordinary heritage with ordinary childhood. When the trials concluded, Iris received a full pardon, restored rank, and an offer to return to active duty. Declined. Instead, she accepted a position as chief flight instructor at the Air Force Academy, teaching the next generation of pilots the same lessons Marcus had taught her: that fear is information, that precision matters more than speed, that integrity is worth more than survival. On her first day, she walked into the briefing room and faced 42 cadets. They stared at her with the mixture of awe and skepticism that young pilots reserved for legends. "I'm Captain Iris Kavanagh. Call sign Widow. Some of you have heard stories about me. Most of them are exaggerated, but the principles behind those stories are true. Competence matters, preparation saves lives, and every second in the air is both privilege and responsibility." A female cadet in the front row raised her hand. "Ma'am, is it true you survived for 7 years after being declared KIA?" "It's true, and I'm going to teach you the skills that made that survival possible. Not because I want you to disappear, but because I want you to come home when things go wrong." She spent the next 2 hours covering tactical fundamentals, her teaching style direct and uncompromising. The cadets absorbed every word, understanding they were learning from someone who'd survived the impossible. After class, the female cadet approached. "Ma'am, permission to ask a personal question." "Granted." "How did you keep going? 7 years alone, presumed dead, raising a child." "How did you not give up?" Iris considered the question. "I kept going because giving up would have dishonored everyone who died in that ambush, because my son deserved a mother who fought, and because the sky doesn't care about your doubts or fears, it only responds to skill and determination." "Thank you, ma'am, that helps." "What's your name, cadet?" "Aaron Vasquez, ma'am." "Where are you from?" "Texas. My dad flew F-15s in Desert Storm. He died when I was 12. I'm here because he taught me that flying is freedom, and I want to honor that." Iris saw herself in this young woman, the same hunger, the same determination to prove something to the ghosts of the past. "Then work hard, Cadet Vasquez. Learn everything, question everything, and remember that competence is the only currency that matters in the air. Everything else is noise." "Yes, ma'am." That evening, Iris drove to David's school and picked him up from aftercare. He was 8 now, tall for his age, with her eyes and his father's smile. She told him about his father, a journalist who'd been killed covering a conflict zone before David was born. It was partially true. The full truth could wait until he was older. "How was school?" "Good. We learned about force and motion in science. I told my teacher you're a pilot, and she said you could come talk about aerodynamics." "I'd like that." They drove home, a small house near the academy with a view of mountains and runway lights. Inside, Iris made dinner while David did homework. Ordinary moments that felt extraordinary after years of fear and isolation. At bedtime, David asked the question he'd been asking for months. "Mom, when can I start flying lessons?" "When you're 12. Same age Grandpa started teaching me." "That's 4 more years." "I know, but in the meantime, I'll teach you theory. How airfoils generate lift, how engines produce thrust, how pilots calculate weight and balance. The science behind flying matters as much as the stick and rudder." "Did Grandpa teach you that?" "He taught me everything important, and now I'm teaching you." David considered this. "Mom, are you famous?" "Why do you ask?" "Because sometimes people recognize you, and they look at you like you're important." Iris sat on the edge of his bed. "I did something difficult once, something that mattered. But fame isn't the point. Doing what's right, protecting people who can't protect themselves, standing up when it's easier to stay down, that's what matters. Like a superhero, like a person who chose not to quit. That's all heroism really is, David. Choosing not to quit when quitting would be easier." He hugged her. "I'm glad you didn't quit, Mom. I'm glad you're here." "Me too, sweetheart, me too." After David slept, Iris went to her home office and opened the letter that had arrived that morning. It was from Tom Garrett, now retired from federal service. His note was brief. "The last conspirator was arrested yesterday. The operation is complete. 43 names are now cleared. Your father would be proud. I know I am. Thank you for your courage." Iris filed the letter away and looked at the photograph on her desk, Marcus in his flight suit, young and invincible, standing beside an F-4 Phantom. She'd kept her promise. She'd honored his memory. She'd built a life worth living. The next morning, Iris arrived at the academy early. She had an advanced tactics seminar with senior cadets, covering scenarios that pushed them beyond textbook knowledge into the realm of instinct and improvisation. The classroom filled with sharp young minds eager to learn from someone who'd lived the lessons she taught. As she began the briefing, Iris felt something she hadn't felt in years: contentment. Not happiness, that was too simple, but the deep satisfaction that comes from purpose aligned with action, from knowledge that your existence contributes something meaningful. Today we're covering decision-making under ambiguity, she announced. Combat situations where intelligence is incomplete, support is compromised, and survival depends on your ability to assess, adapt, and act. This isn't theoretical. These scenarios are drawn from real missions. Some of them are drawn from the worst day of my life. The cadets leaned forward, absolutely focused. In 2018, I was flying close air support over the Hindu Kush. My mission was compromised before I even left the ground. Someone had changed my coordinates, diverted support assets, and sent me into a prepared ambush. I had 90 seconds to recognize the trap, make a decision, and act on incomplete information. Every choice I made in those 90 seconds determined whether I lived or died. She walked them through the scenario: the radio calls that felt wrong, the terrain that didn't match her briefing, the moment she understood she'd been betrayed. Then she detailed her decisions: breaking formation protocol, going dark on communications, flying defensive patterns that prioritize survival over mission completion. Some of you are thinking I aborted the mission, that I ran away. Iris paused. You're right, I did, because sometimes survival is the mission. 43 other personnel didn't make it out. I did, and that survival allowed me to eventually expose the conspiracy that killed them. A male cadet raised his hand. Ma'am, how did you know it was a trap? What specific indicators did you recognize? Timing discrepancies. My support aircraft were delayed by maintenance issues that seemed too convenient. Radio frequencies were preset to channels that minimized my ability to call for help, and my gut told me something was wrong. Never discount instinct. It's your subconscious processing information faster than your conscious mind can articulate. She continued the seminar for 3 hours, covering threat assessment, evasion tactics, and survival psychology. The cadets absorbed everything, understanding they were learning from someone whose knowledge was paid for in blood and isolation. When the seminar ended, several cadets lingered. Aaron Vasquez approached first. Ma'am, that was incredible. I've never heard instructors talk about betrayal as a tactical consideration. It's rare, but it happens. Institutional trust is important, but blind trust gets people killed. Always verify, always question, always have a backup plan. Another cadet male squared shoulders. Ma'am, I read the congressional testimony about your case. What you survived, what you exposed, changed how we handle intelligence oversight. You literally reshaped military procedure. Iris felt uncomfortable with the hero worship, but understood its necessity. These cadets needed to see that surviving impossible situations was achievable through skill, preparation, and refusal to surrender. The procedure changes are good. But remember, procedure exists to support your judgment, not replace it. When things go wrong, and they will, you'll rely on training, instinct, and the will to keep fighting. Everything else is secondary. The cadets thanked her and filed out. Iris remained in the empty classroom, staring at the tactical diagrams still displayed on the screen. Maps of the Hindu Kush, coordinates that had been changed, decisions made in seconds that rippled across years. Her phone buzzed. A text from David's school: field trip next week, aviation museum. Parent volunteers needed. Interested? Iris smiled and replied affirmatively. She'd spent 7 years being a ghost. Now she could be present, visible, contributing to her son's life in ordinary ways that felt extraordinary. That weekend, Iris took David to a small airfield outside Colorado Springs. She'd arranged access to a Cessna 172 for a familiarization flight, not instruction, just exposure. David vibrated with excitement as they performed the pre-flight inspection. "What's this for?" David asked, pointing to the fuel sump. "Testing fuel quality. Water or contaminants can enter the fuel system. We drain a small sample from each tank and verify it's clean. What happens if it's contaminated? The engine fails. And engine failures are best discovered on the ground, not at 3,000 feet. They climbed into the cockpit. Iris walked David through the instrument panel, explaining each gauge and control. His attention was absolute, his questions sharp and insightful. At 8 years old, he already understood basic aerodynamics better than some adult pilots. Iris started the engine and taxied to the runway. Over the radio, she coordinated with the tower and received clearance. "Ready?" she asked David. "Ready." They accelerated down the runway. At rotation speed, Iris pulled back gently on the yoke. The Cessna lifted smoothly, transitioning from ground vehicle to aircraft with the effortless magic that never stopped amazing her, no matter how many times she experienced it. David pressed against the window, watching Colorado Springs shrink below. "This is amazing. This is freedom," Iris replied. "This is what your grandfather taught me, what I'm teaching you. The sky doesn't care about politics or betrayal or fear. It only responds to skill and respect." They flew for an hour, circling over mountains and valleys. Iris pointed out landmarks, explained weather patterns, demonstrated gentle banks and turns. David absorbed everything, his mind processing flight dynamics with natural aptitude. As they approached for landing, Iris let David hold the yoke under her guidance. "Feel how the aircraft responds, how small inputs create large changes. That's sensitivity, that's awareness. Good pilots develop a relationship with their aircraft. They stop flying it and start being part of it." David's hands were steady, surprisingly so for a child. Iris saw Marcus in him, saw the genetic inheritance that transcended death and time. The landing was smooth. They taxied back and shut down. Sudden quiet after engine shutdown, David turned to her. "Mom, this is what I want to do. Forever, I want to fly." Iris felt pride and fear in equal measure. Pride because her son had found his calling. Fear because she understood exactly what that calling would demand from him. "Then we start training. Properly. Theory, simulation, ground school. Flying isn't just about being in the air. It's about understanding every system, every regulation, every scenario. It's work, David." "Hard work. I'm ready. I believe you are." That evening, Iris wrote in her journal, a habit she developed during her years in hiding, a way to process trauma and maintain sanity. She wrote about David's aptitude, about seeing Marcus's legacy continue, about the responsibility of teaching someone to love something that could kill them. Her phone rang. Tom Garrett. "Captain, I hope I'm not calling too late." "Tom, is there a problem?" "No problem. Actually, I have news you might find satisfying. The Deputy Defense Secretary who orchestrated your ambush was sentenced today. 43 counts of negligent homicide, life imprisonment without parole." Iris felt a complex mix of emotions. Justice, yes, but also emptiness. 43 people were still dead. 7 years of her life were still stolen. No sentence could restore that. "Thank you for letting me know. There's more. The families of the personnel killed, they want to meet you, to thank you for exposing the truth. There's a memorial service being planned at Nellie's. They'd like you to speak." Iris's throat tightened. "I'm not good at speeches, Tom." "You don't need to be good, you just need to be honest. These families spent years wondering if their loved ones' deaths mattered. You proved they mattered. You gave them truth instead of lies." "When is the service?" 3 weeks. I'll send details. And Captain, take David. Let him see what his mother fought for. Let him understand that courage isn't absence of fear, it's action despite fear." "I'll consider it. That's all I ask." 3 weeks later, Iris and David stood at Nellie's Air Force Base in front of a memorial wall bearing 43 names. Hundreds of people gathered, families, fellow pilots, commanding officers who'd served with the fallen. The ceremony was formal, painful, and necessary. When Iris's turn came to speak, she approached the podium with David beside her. She looked at the faces in the crowd, grief, hope, anger, gratitude all mixed together. "I'm Captain Iris Kavanagh. I survived the ambush that killed these 43 people. I don't know why I survived when they didn't. Random chance maybe, luck, skill, it doesn't matter. What matters is that their deaths weren't meaningless. They were murdered by people who valued profit over lives, secrecy over honor. But now everyone knows the truth. These names are cleared. Their families have justice. And the people responsible are in prison." She paused, looking at the names etched in stone. Some she'd known, most she hadn't. All of them were connected to her through shared betrayal and survival. I spent 7 years hiding because I was afraid of being silenced. But silence would have dishonored these people more than death ever could. So I came forward, I testified. I refused to let their deaths be forgotten or dismissed. That's all any of us can do, refuse to let injustice win by default. David squeezed her hand. Iris looked down at him, then back at the crowd. This is my son, David. He's 8 years old. He wants to be a pilot like his grandfather, like me. I'm going to teach him everything I know, the technical skills, the tactical thinking, the moral courage to do what's right even when it's dangerous. Because that's the real legacy of these 43 people. Not that they died, but that they served with honor, and that someone cared enough to fight for their truth. She stepped back. The crowd was silent. Then slowly the families approached, one by one, embracing her, thanking her, sharing photographs and stories of the people they'd lost. David watched with serious eyes, beginning to understand the weight his mother carried. That night in their hotel room, David asked the question Iris had been expecting. Mom, were you scared when you were hiding? Every day, fear was my constant companion. But you kept going. I kept going because not going wasn't an option. Your grandfather taught me that the only failure is surrender. Everything else is just tactical adjustment. David was quiet for a long moment. I'm proud of you, Mom. Iris felt tears she'd been holding back for hours finally fall. Thank you, sweetheart. That means everything. They flew home the next day. As the aircraft climbed over Nevada desert, Iris thought about the journey from that ambush 7 years ago to this moment. From being a ghost to being present. From survival to living, from isolation to connection. Her father had been right. She was extraordinary, but not because of combat skills or survival instincts. She was extraordinary because she'd chosen to keep fighting, to seek truth, to raise her son with integrity. That choice, repeated every day across 7 years, had transformed her from a target into a force. Months passed. Iris continued teaching at the academy, pushing cadets to excellence, sharing hard-won wisdom about decision-making under pressure. David thrived in school and began ground school training, studying aerodynamics and navigation with obsessive focus. On Saturdays, they flew together in rental aircraft, building David's understanding of flight dynamics through experience rather than theory alone. One Saturday morning, flying over the mountains west of Colorado Springs, David asked to try a maneuver. Can I try a steep turn, like you taught in your lecture about maintaining altitude while banking? Iris checked the airspace and altitude. All right, remember, add power as you increase bank angle. The increased lift vector means you need more total lift to maintain altitude, and watch your airspeed, don't let it decay. David's hands were confident on the controls. He initiated the bank, smoothly increasing to 45 degrees while simultaneously adding power. The altimeter held steady. Airspeed remained constant. He rolled out precisely on heading, having completed a perfect 360-degree turn. Iris felt a surge of pride that almost hurt. That was textbook, David. Better than textbook, that was instinctive. It felt right, like the aircraft told me what it needed. That's it exactly. That's what your grandfather meant about feeling the aircraft. You're not fighting it, you're cooperating with physics. They flew for another hour, practicing maneuvers and navigation. When they landed, David was glowing with accomplishment. That evening, Iris received an unexpected email. The subject line read, Widow Flight Proposal for Documentary Series. She almost deleted it, but curiosity won out. The email was from a documentary filmmaker who specialized in military history. He wanted to produce a series about Iris's story, the ambush, the survival, the investigation, the impact on defense policy. He promised editorial control and sensitivity to classified information. Iris's first instinct was refusal. She'd spent years avoiding attention, and fame felt like exposure. But then she considered the educational value. Young pilots, especially women, needed to see that extraordinary achievement was possible, that betrayal could be survived, that institutional failures could be exposed and corrected. She showed the email to David. What do you think? Should I let someone tell our story? David read carefully. Will it help people? It might. It might show them that giving up isn't the only option. Then you should do it. Grandpa always said if you know something important, you have an obligation to teach it. Iris smiled. Her son was wise beyond his years. She replied to the filmmaker, agreeing to participate under strict conditions: veto power over content, protection of David's identity until he was old enough to consent, and a commitment to factual accuracy over sensationalism. The documentary took 6 months to produce. Iris sat for interviews, walked through the tactical decisions that had saved her life, and explained the moral courage required to come forward after years of hiding. The filmmaker was professional and respectful. The final product was powerful, a testament to resilience, integrity, and the cost of speaking truth to power. It premiered at a film festival and won awards. Then it was acquired by a streaming service and reached millions of viewers worldwide. Iris received messages from around the globe: aspiring pilots, survivors of betrayal, people who'd been inspired to keep fighting their own battles. One message stood out. It was from Aaron Vasquez, now a second lieutenant completing fighter training. "Ma'am, I just finished the documentary. I always knew you were extraordinary. Now I understand why. Thank you for teaching us that competence and courage matter more than anything. I'm heading to my first operational squadron next month. Everything you taught me about preparation, about instinct, about refusing to quit, that's going with me. Call sign, Phoenix, because I want to rise from challenges the way you did." Iris replied with congratulations and a reminder: stay sharp, stay humble, stay alive. The sky doesn't care about call signs or reputation. Fly smart. Years continued to pass. David graduated high school at the top of his class, accepted into the Air Force Academy on his own merit. Iris attended his induction ceremony with pride and bittersweet awareness that he was following a path that would demand everything from him. On his first night at the academy, David called her. "Mom, it's harder than I expected." "Good. Nothing worth doing is easy. Are you going to quit?" "No." "Then you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Trust your training, trust yourself." "Did you ever doubt yourself when you were in training?" Iris considered lying, offering false confidence, but David deserved truth. "Every day. I doubted whether I was good enough, tough enough, smart enough. But doubt is just a question. The answer is found in action. I kept acting, kept improving, and eventually the doubt became quiet." "Thanks, Mom. That helps." 4 years later, Second Lieutenant David Cavanaugh graduated from the academy with honors. He'd chosen fighter training, following his mother and grandfather into the sky in the most demanding aircraft ever built. Iris attended his graduation, wearing her dress uniform and the decorations she'd earned through blood and survival. After the ceremony, David introduced her to his flight commander, an older colonel with a familiar face. "Captain Cavanaugh," the colonel said, extending his hand. "Or should I say Major Cavanaugh? I heard about your promotion." "Tom Garrett," Iris said, shaking his hand. "You're commanding the training wing now. Seemed like a good way to finish my career, making sure the next generation doesn't get betrayed the way yours was." He looked at David. "Your son is exceptional, scored in the top percentile for spatial awareness and threat assessment. He's got your instincts." "He's got his grandfather's heart," Iris corrected. "That matters more than instincts." Garrett nodded. "Marcus would be proud. I wish he could see this." "He can," Iris said quietly. "I tell him everything. Even if he can't answer, I know he's listening." That evening, Iris and David walked the academy grounds. The sun set over mountains, painting the sky in colors that reminded her why she'd loved flying in the first place: the beauty, the freedom, the perspective that came from seeing the world from above. "Mom, when I get my wings, I want my call sign to be something that honors Grandpa." "What did you have in mind?" "Horizon." "Because he taught you to fly toward the horizon. Because you taught me that no matter how bad things get, there's always another horizon to aim for." Iris felt her eyes burn. "That's perfect, David. He'd love that." They stood in comfortable silence, watching night claim the sky. Somewhere above them, stars appeared one by one. The same stars Marcus had navigated by in Vietnam. The same stars that had guided Iris through 7 years of survival. The same stars that would guide David through whatever challenges awaited him. "Mom, do you ever regret it, becoming a pilot, going through everything you went through?" Never, not once, because flying gave me purpose. It gave me your grandfather's respect. It gave me skills that saved my life. And ultimately, it gave me you. How could I regret any of that? David hugged her. I'm going to make you proud. You already have, sweetheart. Just by being who you are, everything else is bonus. Years passed. David earned his wings. He flew combat missions with precision and courage that earned him respect and promotion. Iris continued teaching, shaping hundreds of pilots who carried forward the lessons of preparation, integrity, and tactical excellence. She published a book about her experiences, part memoir, part tactical manual, part meditation on survival and resilience. It became required reading at military academies worldwide. On the 10th anniversary of her reappearance, Iris stood at a renamed memorial at Nellis Air Force Base. The 43 names were still there, but now accompanied by a plaque explaining the circumstances of their deaths and the investigation that had exposed the truth. Iris's name was there too, not as fallen but as survivor and advocate. They wanted to put my picture here, she told David, who'd flown in from his current deployment. I refused. This memorial isn't about me. It's about them. But you're part of their story, Mom. You gave them justice. I gave them truth. Justice is what the courts provided. Truth is what I fought for. They stood together, two pilots separated by generation but connected by calling, both understanding that the sky demanded everything and gave back freedom, perspective, and purpose. David's phone buzzed. He checked it and smiled. My squadron commander wants to know if you'd be willing to visit our base, do some advanced tactics instruction. Apparently I've been talking you up, Iris laughed. Tell him I'll consider it, but only if his pilots are ready to be pushed harder than they've ever been pushed. They're ready. They know your reputation. Reputations are earned, David, every single day. Never forget that. As they walked back to their car, Iris thought about the journey from that ambush years ago to this moment. She'd been declared dead, had survived through skill and determination, had raised a son who'd become everything she'd hoped for, had reformed broken systems, and had taught countless pilots to fly with excellence and integrity. Her father had told her to be extraordinary. She'd honored that request not through fame or achievement, but through the choice to keep fighting, to seek truth, to live with purpose. That ultimately was what separated survival from living, the conscious decision to make each day matter, to contribute something meaningful, to refuse the comfort of surrender. The sky darkened overhead. Stars emerged, ancient and constant. Iris looked up and felt Marcus watching, felt the connection that transcended death and time. She'd kept her promise. She'd been extraordinary. And the story continued, carried forward by her son and the hundreds of pilots who'd learned from her that competence, courage, and integrity were the only currencies that mattered. The rest was just noise. And Widow Kavanagh had never had patience for noise.